The CEO took the beautiful girl on a business trip. With only one room left in the hotel, they slept together. She got pregnant with twins. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome to Mr. Peter Stories. Happiness to keep you smiling, trials to keep you strong, success to keep you confident, faith to keep you going, and belief that each day is a gift. Today, I want to share a special secret. 30 years ago, on the 16th of January, I met the most beautiful soul in the world. My wife, Binta Peter, a proud black woman. She's been my strength, my joy, and my greatest blessing. We're so close to an incredible milestone. 10,000 followers. Just 900 subscribers are left to reach this goal. I know it's a big challenge with only one day to go, but with your love and support, anything is possible. Let's make it happen for her and keep that beautiful smile on her face. How did you enjoy the last story? Don't forget to leave your feedback in the comments. Now let's dive into today's story. Barsine Williams had always believed that perfection lay in the details. As she stood before the full-length mirror in her corner office bathroom on the 42nd floor of Kingston & Associates, she meticulously adjusted her crisp white blazer for the 7th time. The garment, a recent acquisition from a boutique in Milan, represented everything she had fought to become: pristine, powerful, untouchable. At 28, she was the youngest junior partner in the firm's history, a fact that both thrilled and terrified her. The weight of that achievement pressed down on her shoulders like an invisible crown, demanding perfection in every gesture, every decision, every breath. The Manhattan sunset painted her reflection in hues of amber and gold, transforming the bathroom's stark white walls into a canvas of warm light. She studied her reflection with the same analytical precision she applied to merger contracts. Her dark hair was pulled back into a sleek chignon, not a single strand daring to rebel against its prescribed place. The subtle makeup she wore emphasized her sharp cheekbones and dark eyes, a war paint of sorts for the corporate battlefield. A gentle knock at her office door interrupted her inspection. "Ms. Williams?" Her assistant Marcus called through the door. "Mr. Riker's car will be arriving in 20 minutes. Thaddeus Riker." The name alone sent a flutter of nervous energy through her stomach. As CEO of Kingston & Associates, he was more legend than man to most of the firm's employees. But to Barsine, he had become something else entirely over the past 2 years. A mentor, a guide through the treacherous waters of corporate law, and perhaps the only person who truly saw beyond her carefully constructed facade. "Thank you, Marcus," she called back, her voice steady, despite the anticipation coursing through her veins. "Has the Singapore portfolio been delivered to the car?" "Yes, ma'am, along with the preliminary merger documents and the market analysis you requested." Barsine allowed herself a small smile. This trip to Singapore wasn't just another business meeting. It was the culmination of everything she had worked for since that first day she walked into Kingston & Associates as a wide-eyed associate fresh out of Harvard Law. The Chen-Goldman merger would be the largest deal in the firm's history, and Thaddeus had personally requested her presence for the negotiations. She gathered her leather briefcase, checking its contents one final time: passport, currency in 3 denominations, tablet loaded with every possible document they might need, and a spare pair of contact lenses. Another lesson learned the hard way during her first international business trip. The polished surface of her desk reflected the city lights now beginning to twinkle against the darkening sky, a constellation of human ambition spread out before her. As she crossed her office, her heels clicking against the marble floor in a steady rhythm, her eyes fell on the single personal item she allowed herself in this space: a small, worn photograph tucked into the corner of a sterling silver frame. 3 young girls in foster care uniforms smiled awkwardly at the camera, their hands clasped together in a promise of eternal friendship. Barsine was in the middle, her wild curls refusing to be tamed even then, flanked by Sarah and Maya, both long lost to the system that had shaped them all. The photograph served as a reminder of why she pushed herself so hard, why every detail had to be perfect. She wasn't just working for herself, she was working to become the kind of person who could make a difference, who could change the system that had failed so many others like her. The elevator ride to the lobby was a descent through layers of power and privilege. Each floor represented a different stratum of the corporate world. Associates burning the midnight oil on the 38th floor, senior partners entertaining clients in the plush conference rooms of the 40th, and finally, the rarefied air of the executive floor where she now belonged. The lobby of Kingston and Associates was designed to intimidate. Soaring ceilings supported by columns of Italian marble created an atmosphere more suited to a modern cathedral than a law firm. The security desk, staffed by ex-military personnel in impeccable suits, tracked every movement with discreet efficiency. "Good evening, Ms. Williams." The night security guard, James, greeted her with a respectful nod. "Mr. Riker's car is approaching." The massive glass doors parted silently as she stepped out into the evening air. The temperature had dropped since morning, carrying with it the first hints of autumn. A sleek black Mercedes S-Class pulled up to the curb, its windows tinted to opacity. The driver, a man Barcine knew only as Thompson, emerged to open the rear door. And there he was. Thaddeus Riker sat in the back seat, his attention focused on a document in his hands. At 45, he carried his power with an ease that came from years at the top. His dark hair was touched with grey at the temples, and laugh lines creased the corners of his eyes, though few at the firm had ever seen him actually laugh. He looked up as she approached, those steel-grey eyes warming with his signature half-smile. "Barcine," he said, shifting over to make room for her, right on time as always. She slid into the leather seat beside him, careful to maintain a professional distance despite the intimate confines of the car. "The Singapore team sent over their latest projections," she said, reaching for her tablet. "I've identified 3 potential areas of concern in their valuation model." Thaddeus held up a hand, stopping her. "We have a 14-hour flight ahead of us to discuss business. Right now, I want to know if you're ready for this." The question caught her off guard. In their 2 years of working together, Thaddeus had never questioned her readiness for any assignment. "Sir, this isn't just another merger, Barcine. The Chen family has controlled the Asian technology market for 3 generations. They're not just looking for a business partner, they're looking for someone who understands the weight of legacy, the responsibility of carrying generations of expectations on their shoulders." His eyes held hers, searching. "Sound familiar?" The knowing look in his eyes made her breath catch. Of course he would understand the parallel. The foster child turned corporate warrior, forever trying to build a legacy from scratch. It was one of the reasons he had taken her under his wing, recognizing in her the same drive that had propelled him from a middle-class background in Boston to the pinnacle of corporate law. "I'm ready," she said, meeting his gaze without hesitation. "The Chens need more than just favorable terms. They need assurance that their family's work will be respected and preserved. I've studied their history, their corporate culture, even their philanthropic initiatives. This merger isn't just about combining assets, it's about merging families." Something flickered in Thaddeus's eyes. Approval, perhaps, or something deeper that she couldn't quite name. He nodded once, then turned his attention to the passing city streets. "Tell me about those concerns you found in their valuation model." As the car merged into the evening traffic, Barcine began her analysis, her voice confident and clear. But beneath her professional exterior, something shifted, like tectonic plates moving imperceptibly beneath the Earth's surface. This trip to Singapore would define her career, but neither she nor Thaddeus could have predicted how it would define their lives. The corporate jet awaited them at Teterboro Airport, its sleek white form gleaming under the floodlights. As they climbed the stairs, the pilot greeted them with a weather report. Clear skies until Singapore, where a massive storm system was developing. Barcine settled into her leather seat, watching as Manhattan's lights grew smaller beneath them, each glowing point representing countless stories like her own, ambitions and dreams reaching toward the sky. Thaddeus sat across from her, his jacket now draped over the seat beside him, his collar loosened just enough to remind her that he was, after all, human. As the jet climbed through the clouds, he poured 2 glasses of scotch, sliding one across the table to her. "To legacy," he said, raising his glass. "To legacy," she echoed, not yet understanding how that word would come to mean something entirely different by the time they returned. The jet banked eastward, carrying them toward a future neither could have anticipated. Below them, Manhattan continued its eternal dance of light and shadow, while ahead, across thousands of miles of darkness, a storm was brewing in Singapore, a storm that would change everything. Chapter 2. Thunderstorm's Kiss. The Marina Bay Sands Hotel rose before them like a fantastic ship balanced impossibly atop 3 towering pillars, its iconic silhouette nearly lost in the gathering storm clouds. Lightning flickered in the distance, illuminating the Singapore skyline in brief, brilliant bursts as their car wound its way through the evening traffic. Barcine watched raindrops begin to streak across the window, each one racing down the glass like tears. The 14-hour flight had left her exhausted, yet her mind refused to quiet, already rehearsing tomorrow's negotiations. Beside her, Thaddeus spoke quietly on the phone, his voice carrying the weight of authority even in these late hours. "I understand," he was saying, his jaw tightening slightly. "No, that won't be acceptable. We'll need to sort this out immediately." He ended the call, turning to Barcine with an expression she had never seen before, something between frustration and apologetic concern. "There's been a problem with our reservations," he said, running a hand through his slightly disheveled hair. "The technology convention has the hotel overbooked, and somehow our separate rooms were consolidated into a single executive suite." Barcine felt her heart skip a beat, but kept her expression professionally neutral. "I can try the Fullerton or Raffles. Everything within 20 miles is booked solid," Thaddeus interrupted, checking his phone again. "The convention has filled every luxury hotel in the area, and we need to be close to the Chen family's offices." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The suite has a separate bedroom and living area. I'll take the sofa, of course." Before she could protest, the car pulled up to the hotel's entrance. A uniformed valet opened their door, holding an umbrella against the now steady rain. The lobby of Marina Bay Sands was a cathedral of luxury, all soaring ceilings and pristine marble. But Barcine barely registered its grandeur as they made their way to the reception desk. The suite, when they reached it, was larger than Barcine's first apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city and the roiling clouds above it. Lightning flashed again, closer now, followed almost immediately by a crack of thunder that seemed to shake the building itself. "The bedroom's through there," Thaddeus said, setting his briefcase down near the elegant sofa that would apparently be his bed for the night. "You should get some rest. Tomorrow." Another thunderclap interrupted him, and the lights flickered ominously. Barcine jumped despite herself, and Thaddeus gave her that half-smile she had come to know so well. "Not a fan of storms." "Not particularly," she admitted, then added with attempted lightness, "especially not 57 floors up in a foreign country." Thaddeus crossed to a cabinet near the wet bar, opening it to reveal a selection of bottles. He pulled out one with an elegant label, examining it in the dim light. Macallan 25. At least they got that right. He looked up at her, holding the bottle like a peace offering. A drink might help with the storm, and we should discuss tomorrow's strategy, professional discussion, safe ground. Barsine nodded, slipping off her heels and padding across the plush carpet to one of the leather armchairs. Thaddeus poured 2 generous measures of the amber liquid, handling the crystal glasses with the same precision he brought to everything. Thunder rolled again as he handed her a glass, this time accompanied by a sheet of rain that transformed the windows into waterfalls. The city lights beyond blurred into impressionistic smears of color, creating an oddly intimate atmosphere in the suite. "Your analysis on the flight was impressive," Thaddeus said, settling into the chair opposite her. "Especially your insights into the Chen family's expansion patterns." "They're not just expanding," Barsine replied, warming slightly under his praise and the whiskey. "They're building a legacy. Every acquisition, every merger, it's all part of a larger pattern. They're not just thinking about the next quarter or even the next year, they're thinking about the next generation." "Speaking from experience?" The question caught her off guard. Thaddeus had never asked about her personal life before, had never crossed that carefully maintained line between mentor and protégé. Perhaps it was the storm, or the lateness of the hour, or the smooth burn of expensive whiskey, but Barsine found herself answering honestly. "More like speaking from its absence," she said softly. "When you grow up in the foster system, you learn to think differently about legacy. It's not something you inherit, it's something you have to build from scratch." Lightning illuminated Thaddeus's face, and she saw something shift in his expression. "I didn't know," he said simply. "It's not something I generally share." Barsine took another sip of whiskey, letting it warm her from the inside. "But it's what drives me. Every child in that system dreams of being someone important, someone who matters. I was just stubborn enough to make it happen." Thunder crashed again, and Thaddeus leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "You want to know why I chose you for this merger?" Barsine nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "Because you understand hunger," he said, his voice low and intense. "Not the physical kind, though I suspect you've known that too, but the kind that lives in your soul, the hunger to prove yourself, to build something lasting, to matter." He swirled the whiskey in his glass, watching the light play across its surface. "I recognized it because I've felt it too." "You?" She couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. Thaddeus Riker had always seemed to her the epitome of old money and inherited privilege. He smiled, but there was no humor in it. "My father was a high school janitor in South Boston. My mother cleaned houses for the same people whose children now sit on our board. Everything I have, I built myself." He finished his whiskey in one smooth motion. "Well, almost everything." "Your marriage," Barsine said softly, remembering the gossip that had circulated through the firm 2 years ago when his wife had left him. "Isolde," he said her name like a sigh. "She was from the right family, went to the right schools. Marriage to her opened doors that my own achievements couldn't. And for a while it was—" He trailed off, then shook his head. "But hunger scared her. She wanted comfort, stability, the same life she'd always known. And you wanted more. I wanted to build something that would last." He stood, walking to the window to watch the storm rage against the glass. "Something that would matter long after I was gone." Barsine found herself rising too, drawn to his silhouette against the storm-dark sky. "Is that why you mentor young lawyers? To pass on what you've built?" He turned to face her, and suddenly she realized how close they were standing. "I mentor promising lawyers because talent deserves guidance. I mentor you because—" Thunder crashed, drowning out his words, but his eyes said what his voice couldn't. The air between them seemed to crackle with the same electricity that lit up the sky outside. Barsine knew she should step back, should maintain the professional distance that had defined their relationship for 2 years. But something held her there, caught in the gravity of this moment. "Because what?" she whispered. Instead of answering, Thaddeus reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face with infinite gentleness. The touch sent electricity through her skin, making her breath catch. Time seemed to suspend itself, stretched taut as a wire between them. Lightning flashed again, painting them in stark black and white for a fraction of a second. In that moment of illumination, Barcine saw every barrier between them, professional, social, personal, dissolve like sugar in rain. When Thaddeus's lips met hers, it felt as inevitable as the thunder that followed. The kiss was gentle at first, a question more than a demand. But as the storm raged outside, something wild and hungry awakened in both of them. Barcine's hands found their way to his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath expensive cotton. His fingers tangled in her hair, destroying hours of careful styling in seconds. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, the world had changed irrevocably. There would be no going back to mentor and protege, to CEO and junior partner. They had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "Barcine." Thaddeus breathed her name like a prayer. "We should—" She silenced him with another kiss, pouring 2 years of unspoken longing into it. The storm outside was nothing compared to the tempest in her heart, the wild joy and terror of falling into something she couldn't control or analyze or plan for. They made their way to the bedroom in a dance of kisses and half-shed clothing, each touch a revelation, each breath a new confession. The thunder provided a primal backdrop to their passion, nature's approval of this union of kindred spirits. Hours later, as the storm began to fade into the distance, they lay tangled in the sheets, Barcine's head resting on Thaddeus's chest. The city lights had begun to emerge again from behind the dispersing clouds, each one a star in their private universe. "What happens now?" Barcine asked softly, tracing patterns on his skin. Thaddeus caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. "Now we sleep," he said. "And tomorrow we negotiate one of the biggest mergers in corporate history. And us." He was quiet for a long moment, his fingers running through her hair. "Tomorrow belongs to Kingston and Associates," he said finally. "But tonight belongs to us." Barcine closed her eyes, letting the rhythm of his heartbeat lull her towards sleep. She knew there would be consequences, complications, challenges to face. But for now, in this moment between storm and sunrise, she allowed herself to simply exist in this newfound happiness. The last thing she remembered before drifting off was Thaddeus whispering something in her ear, his voice tender in a way she had never heard before. But sleep claimed her before she could make out the words, leaving them to echo in her dreams like distant thunder. Chapter 3. Dawn's Awakening. Singapore's sunrise painted the sky in watercolor hues of pink and gold, the aftermath of the storm leaving the air crystalline and new. Barcine stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the executive suite, wrapped in a hotel robe, watching the city come alive beneath her. Every detail of the previous night was etched in her memory with perfect clarity. The storm, the whiskey, Thaddeus's touch. The sound of the shower running in the bathroom behind her brought reality crashing back. In less than 2 hours, they would be sitting across from the Chen family's board of directors, representing Kingston and Associates in the most significant merger negotiation of the decade. The weight of professional responsibility settled over her like a heavy cloak. She heard the shower stop, and her heart began to race. How did one transition from a night of passion back to the sterile world of corporate law? The question answered itself as Thaddeus emerged, already half-dressed in tailored trousers and a crisp white shirt. "Good morning," he said, his voice carrying that familiar note of authority, though his eyes softened when they met hers. "Did you sleep well?" The simple question carried layers of meaning, but Barcine matched his professional tone. "Yes, thank you." I've ordered breakfast and asked Marcus to send up the updated projections from New York. Excellent. He moved to the mirror, fixing his tie with practiced precision. The Chens will be expecting us at 9. Their corporate headquarters is known for its traditional approach. We'll need to be particularly mindful of protocol. And just like that, they were back in their roles, CEO and junior partner, mentor and protege. The transformation should have felt jarring, but instead, it was almost a relief. This was familiar territory, a dance they both knew the steps to. Barsini retreated to the bedroom to dress, selecting a charcoal grey suit that projected both power and respect. As she applied her makeup, she studied her reflection for any visible sign of change, any evidence of the night's passion. But the woman who looked back at her was the same polished professional she'd always been, perhaps with just a hint more confidence in her eyes. Breakfast arrived with the projections, a feast of tropical fruits, pastries and coffee that neither of them did more than pick at. They were too focused on the documents spread across the dining table, reviewing strategies and contingencies. The Chen family's primary concern will be maintaining control over their technological innovations, Thaddeus said, highlighting a section of the report. We need to emphasize how our proposed structure preserves their autonomy while providing the global reach they need. Barsine nodded, making notes in her precise handwriting. I've analyzed their past partnerships. They've never agreed to any deal that didn't include at least one family member on the executive board. We should be prepared to offer them 2 seats. Thaddeus looked up, that familiar half-smile playing at his lips. You've done your homework. Always. She met his gaze steadily, professional pride momentarily overshadowing personal complexity. The ride to Chen Global Technologies headquarters was silent, both of them lost in preparation. The building itself was a perfect blend of traditional Chinese architecture and modern innovation, much like the family that had built it. As they passed through security, Barsine noticed how the guards showed deference not just to their visitors' status, but to the traditions their presence represented. The conference room they were led to offered a stunning view of the Singapore Strait, cargo ships moving like toys across the water far below. Matthew Chen, the family patriarch, rose to greet them. At 72, he carried himself with the quiet dignity of a man who had built an empire from the ground up. Mr. Riker, he said, extending his hand, and Ms. Williams, welcome to Singapore. His perfect Oxford English carried just a hint of an accent, like aged wine, leaving a subtle aftertaste. The next 6 hours were a masterclass in high-stakes negotiation. Barsine watched in admiration as Thaddeus navigated the complex dynamics of family politics and corporate ambition. But it was when the discussion turned to intellectual property rights that she saw her opening. If I may, she interjected during a natural pause, her voice clear and confident. The concern seems to be not just about protecting patents, but about preserving the innovative spirit that created them. Matthew Chen's eyes sharpened with interest. Continue, Ms. Williams. Barsine stood, moving to the digital display where their proposal was projected. The Chen family hasn't just built a technology company. You've created an incubator for innovation, a place where creativity is nurtured and protected. Our proposed structure doesn't just maintain that environment, it expands it. She began to outline a modified version of their original proposal, one that incorporated elements of Chen Global's existing research and development culture while opening new avenues for global expansion. As she spoke, she could feel the energy in the room shift, the younger Chen family members leaning forward with increasing interest. What you're suggesting, Matthew Chen said slowly, is not a merger in the traditional sense, but a symbiosis. Exactly. Barsine pulled up a series of charts she had prepared. Kingston and Associates brings global reach and legal protection, while Chen Global maintains its creative autonomy and family-centered culture. Together, we create something greater than the sum of its parts. She was aware of Thaddeus watching her, his expression unreadable. But she kept her focus on the Chen family, addressing their concerns one by one with a precision that came from countless hours of preparation. When they broke for lunch, Matthew Chen insisted on hosting them in the company's private dining room. As servants brought out course after course of exquisite Chinese cuisine, Barcine found herself engaged in conversation with Chen's granddaughter, Lisa, a brilliant young engineer who had designed many of the company's recent innovations. "You understand," Lisa said quietly, her English as perfect as her grandfather's, "what it means to build something from nothing." Barcine glanced up, surprised. "What makes you say that?" "The way you speak about legacy and innovation. It's not academic to you, it's personal." Lisa smiled. "Just as it is for us." Across the table, Thaddeus was deep in conversation with Matthew Chen, but Barcine caught him watching her with that same unreadable expression. Pride? Admiration? Something deeper? She pushed the question aside, focusing on her conversation with Lisa. The afternoon session was even more intense than the morning. Every clause, every term was scrutinized and debated. But there was an underlying current of respect now, a recognition of shared values and understanding. As the sun began to set, Matthew Chen leaned back in his chair, looking at each person in the room in turn. "I believe," he said slowly, "that we have the beginnings of an agreement." The words sent a ripple of excitement through the room. Thaddeus maintained his professional composure, but Barcine saw the subtle shift in his posture that indicated satisfaction. "We'll have our legal team draw up the preliminary documents," Thaddeus said. "We can reconvene tomorrow to review them." As they gathered their materials, Matthew Chen approached Barcine. "Ms. Williams," he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority, "you have done your firm proud today. Your understanding of our family's values, it speaks well of Kingston and Associates' future." "Thank you, Mr. Chen," Barcine replied, bowing slightly in respect. "Your family's legacy is an inspiration." The car ride back to the hotel was filled with a different kind of tension than the mornings. They had succeeded beyond expectations, but the professional triumph was tangled up with personal complications that could no longer be ignored. In the elevator, Thaddeus finally spoke. "You were brilliant today." "I was doing my job," Barcine replied, but she couldn't quite suppress a smile. "No," he said, as they reached their floor. "You were doing much more than that. You weren't just negotiating a merger, you were building bridges between families, between cultures." They reached the suite door, and Thaddeus paused, keycard in hand. "Last night," he began, then stopped, choosing his words carefully. "Last night was, complicated," Barcine suggested. "Inevitable," he corrected, opening the door, "like watching a storm gather on the horizon. You can prepare for it, try to avoid it, but in the end, all you can do is weather it and emerge changed." They stood in the suite's living room, the city lights spread out before them once again. The storm had passed, but its effects lingered in the charged air between them. "What happens in Singapore?" Barcine began, but Thaddeus cut her off with a gentle finger to her lips. "Don't," he said softly. "Don't reduce this to a cliché. What happened last night, what happened today in that boardroom, it's all part of something bigger, something real." She knew he was right. Their connection wasn't just physical attraction or professional admiration. It was a recognition of kindred spirits, of shared hunger and ambition, of understanding what it meant to build something from nothing. "The merger," she said, practical even in this moment of vulnerability, "will succeed because of you." He completed her thought. "You didn't just understand the Chen family's needs. You spoke to their hearts. You showed them that Kingston and Associates isn't just about corporate power, it's about building lasting legacies. He stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. Just as you've shown me that success isn't just about power or profit, it's about finding someone who understands your dreams, who shares your hunger. This kiss was different from last night's storm-driven passion. It was slower, deeper, a seal on unspoken promises. When they finally parted, Barsine knew that everything had changed, not just between them, but within herself. She was no longer just the ambitious junior partner, determined to prove herself. She had become something more, a builder of bridges, a weaver of legacies, a woman who could stand equal to both corporate titans and family patriarchs. As night settled over Singapore, they ordered room service and spent hours discussing the day's negotiations, their professional insights now enriched by personal intimacy. They talked about the future, of the merger, of their careers, and in careful, indirect ways, of themselves. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new complications. But for now, in this room high above Singapore, they had found something rare and precious, a partnership of equals, bound together by shared dreams and mutual understanding. Chapter 4. Secrets and Signs. 2 months after Singapore, Manhattan's autumn had painted Central Park in shades of gold and crimson. Barsine stood in her private bathroom at Kingston and Associates, staring at the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, as if they might somehow change through sheer force of will. This was the 3rd test she'd taken this morning, each one confirming what she had begun to suspect a week ago. Her hand trembled slightly as she set the test down on the marble counter. The morning light streaming through the frosted window seemed too harsh, too revealing. She caught her reflection in the mirror, still the picture of corporate success in her tailored navy suit, not a hair out of place. But beneath that polished exterior, everything had changed. A knock at her office door made her jump. "Ms. Williams?" Marcus's voice carried through the wood. "The Chen family's representatives are online too, and Mr. Riker wants to see you in his office at 11. Thaddeus." Her hand instinctively went to her stomach, still flat beneath her silk blouse. They had been careful since returning from Singapore, maintaining strict professional boundaries at the office while sharing secret moments in private. Their relationship had deepened over the past 2 months, moving beyond mere passion into something profound and real. But this would change everything. "Thank you, Marcus," she called back, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind. "Tell the Chens I'll be right with them." She slipped the pregnancy test into her purse, squared her shoulders, and stepped back into her office. The familiar space, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and modern art, felt suddenly foreign, as if she were seeing it through new eyes. Her Cornell law degree hung on the wall beside her junior partner certificate. Symbols of everything she had worked for, everything that was now at risk. The call with the Chen family's legal team was mercifully straightforward. Final details about patent transfers and board appointments. Barsine handled it with her usual precision, even as her mind raced with implications and possibilities. When she finally hung up, she had 20 minutes before her meeting with Thaddeus. She needed air. The executive floor's private terrace was empty at this hour. Barsine stood at the railing, looking out over the city she had fought so hard to conquer. Far below, yellow taxis crawled through the streets like busy insects, while pedestrians hurried along the sidewalks, each pursuing their own dreams and dealing with their own secrets. "I thought I might find you here." The voice made her freeze. It wasn't Thaddeus. It was female, cultured, with the kind of refined accent that spoke of old money and expensive schools. Barsine turned slowly, already knowing who she would see. Isolde Riker stood in the terrace doorway, as elegant as her society page photos suggested. Her blonde hair was styled perfectly, her designer outfit impeccable. But there was something else. A pallor beneath her makeup, a slight tremor in the hand that held her purse. "Mrs. Riker," Barsine said, her legal training kicking in, keeping her voice professional and neutral. "This is unexpected. Isolde, please." She stepped onto the terrace, closing the door behind her. "And yes, I imagine it is." She moved to the railing, standing a few feet from Barsine. "You've done remarkable things with the Chen merger. The whole legal community is talking about it." "Thank you," Barsine replied carefully, studying the other woman's profile. "But I suspect you didn't come here to discuss corporate law." A small smile curved Isolde's lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Direct. Thaddeus always admired that about you." She turned to face Barsine fully. "No, I didn't come to discuss law. I came because things are about to become complicated." Something in her tone made Barsine's skin prickle. "How so?" "I'm dying," Isolde said simply, as if commenting on the weather. "Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors give me 6 months, maybe less." The words hung in the crisp autumn air between them. Barsine felt the world tilt slightly, her morning sickness not helping the sudden vertigo. "I'm so sorry," she said, and meant it. "Save your sympathy," Isolde replied, but without bitterness. "I've made my peace with it, but there are things that need to be set right before I go. Thaddeus ... What about him? He'll blame himself. It's what he does. Takes responsibility for everything, even things beyond his control." Isolde's hand tightened on her purse. "When I left him 2 years ago, I told him it was because he was too focused on work, too driven. The truth is, I left because I was afraid." Barsine waited, sensing there was more. "I was afraid of what he was building, of the legacy he was creating. It was bigger than our comfortable world of charity galas and summer homes. It demanded something from him that I couldn't understand." She looked at Barsine directly. "But you understand it, don't you?" "Yes," Barsine said softly. "I do." "Of course you do. You're just like him, hungry for something more than what life handed you." Isolde turned back to the city view. "I've asked him to take care of me during what's left, and he'll do it because he's honorable, because despite everything, we shared 15 years of our lives." The implications hit Barsine like a physical blow. Thaddeus would never refuse his dying ex-wife's request. His sense of duty, of responsibility, would demand that he step up, which meant, "Does he know yet?" Barsine asked, her hand unconsciously moving to her stomach. Isolde caught the gesture, her eyes widening slightly. "No," she said after a moment. "I'm seeing him this afternoon." She studied Barsine with new intensity. "How far along?" "I just found out this morning," Barsine admitted, seeing no point in denying it. "Singapore?" When Barsine nodded, Isolde gave a small, sad laugh. "Life has a way of complicating things, doesn't it?" She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Listen to me carefully, Barsine. What I'm about to tell you, it changes everything." But before she could continue, the terrace door opened. Marcus stood there, looking apologetic. "Miss Williams, Mr. Riker is asking for you. He says it's urgent." Isolde stepped back, her composed mask slipping back into place. "You should go. He doesn't know I'm here. I wanted to speak to you first." She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. "Call me. There's more you need to know." Barsine took the card automatically, her mind spinning with questions. But Marcus was waiting, and she could feel the weight of professional obligations pulling her back to reality. The walk to Thaddeus's office felt like crossing a minefield. Each step brought her closer to a conversation that would change everything. But which conversation? Should she tell him about the pregnancy, about Isolde's visit, about the secret Isolde had been about to reveal? His office door was open, sunlight streaming through the windows behind his desk. He was standing at his private bar, pouring 2 glasses of water. The sight of him, so familiar yet now somehow different, made her heart ache. "Barsine," he said warmly, turning to hand her a glass. "I wanted to discuss the Chen family's latest proposals." She took the water, their fingers brushing briefly. 2 months ago, such a touch would have sent electricity through her. Now it felt like a farewell. "The proposals," she repeated, taking a sip to steady herself. "Yes, of course." They fell into their usual rhythm of legal discussion, analyzing clauses and strategizing responses. But underneath the professional dialogue, Barsine felt the weight of secrets pressing down on her. Her secret, growing inside her with each passing moment. Isolde's secret, whatever it was, waiting to be revealed. And the biggest secret of all, their relationship, about to be tested in ways neither of them could have anticipated. As Thaddeus outlined his concerns about a particular contractual point, Barsine studied him surreptitiously. The strong line of his jaw, the intensity in his grey eyes, the slight grey at his temples that only made him more distinguished. Would their child have his eyes, his determination, his hunger to build something lasting? "Barsine?" His voice broke through her thoughts. "Are you all right? You seem distracted." She opened her mouth to tell him everything, about the pregnancy test in her purse, about his ex-wife waiting to deliver her own news. But before she could speak, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and something in his expression changed. "I'm sorry," he said, "but I need to cut this short. Something's come up that requires my immediate attention." "Isolde." It had to be. Barsine nodded, rising from her chair. "Of course. We can continue this later." At the door, she paused, looking back at him. He was already focused on his phone, his brow furrowed in concentration. In that moment, she made her decision. She couldn't tell him about the pregnancy, not now, not when he was about to face Isolde's devastating news. Back in her office, Barsine closed the door and leaned against it, her hand going to her stomach. "I'm sorry, little one," she whispered, "but sometimes timing is everything." She pulled out the business card Isolde had given her. The elegant cream cardstock bore only a phone number, no name, no title. Whatever secret Isolde needed to share, it was clearly something she wanted to keep discreet. Barsine's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Mrs. Riker is in Mr. Riker's office." Through her window, she could see the autumn leaves swirling in the wind, their colors brilliant against the blue sky. Life had a way of changing just when you thought you had everything figured out. She had achieved everything she had ever dreamed of: professional success, recognition, love. Now it was all balanced on a knife's edge, with 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test and a dying woman's secrets threatening to change everything. She picked up her phone and dialed the number on the card. It rang 3 times before Isolde answered. "That was quick," Isolde said, her voice tight with what might have been pain. "Can you meet me tonight? There's something you need to see." Barsine looked out at the city, at the life she had built, at the future that now seemed so uncertain. Where? "The St. Regis, 8 o'clock, come alone." Isolde paused. "And Barsine?" "Don't tell Thaddeus, not yet. Once you know everything, then you can decide what to do." The line went dead, leaving Barsine with more questions than answers. Outside her office, she could hear the normal sounds of corporate life continuing, phones ringing, keyboards clicking, lives moving forward. But in here, in this moment, everything had stopped. She reached into her purse and touched the pregnancy test, its plastic surface now warm from being carried close to her heart. Soon, all the secrets would come out. Soon, everything would change. But for now, she had decisions to make and truth to face. The sun continued its arc across the autumn sky, shadows lengthening across her office floor. In a few hours, she would meet Isolde and learn whatever truth the other woman needed to share. But first, she had work to do. The Chen merger wouldn't wait, even if her personal life was unraveling. Barsine straightened her shoulders and opened her laptop. She was still Barsine Williams, junior partner, negotiator of impossible deals. Whatever came next, she would face it with the same determination that had brought her from foster care to the top of corporate law. But as she began to type, her free hand rested protectively over her stomach, where the biggest secret of all was just beginning to grow. Chapter 5. Shadows of Truth. The St. Regis Hotel stood like a sentinel in the gathering dusk, its limestone facade glowing softly in the early evening light. Barsine checked her watch, 7:55 p.m., as she stepped through the revolving doors into the opulent lobby. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, each step echoing with the weight of anticipation. The text from Isolde had been specific. Suite 1504. No additional context, no hint of what revelations awaited. Barsine's mind had spent the afternoon spinning through possibilities, each scenario more unsettling than the last. The elevator ride felt eternal, her reflection in the polished brass doors showing a woman who appeared composed, but whose eyes held barely concealed tension. Isolde opened the door before Barsine could knock. The elegant woman from the terrace was gone, replaced by someone who looked smaller, more vulnerable in loose silk pajamas and a cashmere wrap. The suite behind her was dimly lit, medical equipment discreetly arranged in one corner. "Thank you for coming," Isolde said, stepping aside to let Barsine enter. "I wasn't sure you would. Your secret seemed important enough to warrant it." Barsine followed her into the suite sitting area, noting how Isolde moved carefully, as if every step required calculation. "Would you like something to drink? The hotel keeps an excellent selection of non-alcoholic options." Isolde's knowing glance made Barsine's hand instinctively move to her stomach. "For both our sakes." "Water is fine." Isolde poured 2 glasses from a crystal pitcher, her hand trembling slightly. "I saw Thaddeus this afternoon," she said, settling into an armchair. "I told him about the cancer." "How did he take it?" Barsine asked softly, accepting the water. Like Thaddeus, shouldering the responsibility as if he could somehow fix it through sheer force of will. Isolde's smile was sad. "He's already arranging for the best oncologists, private nurses, everything money can buy." "That sounds like him." "Yes, it does." Isolde set her glass down and reached for a leather portfolio on the side table. "Which is why what I'm about to show you is so important." She pulled out a thick envelope. "These arrived last week, anonymously." Barsine took the envelope, its weight substantial in her hands. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. As she began to look through them, her breath caught. They showed Thaddeus in various locations over the past 2 years, entering buildings, shaking hands with people she didn't recognize, passing envelopes in shadowy corners. "Keep going," Isolde urged. The next set of photos made Barsine's blood run cold. They showed transfers of large sums of money, offshore accounts, meetings with known corporate raiders, and most damning of all, documents that suggested Thaddeus had been orchestrating hostile takeovers of vulnerable companies, only to strip them of assets and leave their employees destitute. "This can't be real," Barsine whispered. "That's what I thought at first." Isolde leaned forward, her face tight with pain. "But I had them authenticated. The photos are real, the documents are real. Thaddeus, the man we both thought we knew, has been living a double life." Barsine's legal mind kicked in, analyzing angles, looking for explanations. These could be manipulated, taken out of context. Look at the last page. It was a medical report, not Isolde's current diagnosis, but one from 2 years ago. It showed early signs of the cancer that was now killing her. And beside it, emails from Thaddeus to unknown recipients, discussing how to use his wife's illness as cover for corporate maneuvers. He knew. Isolde said quietly. He knew I was sick before I did, and he used me, as part of his games. She took a shaky breath. Just like he's using you. No. Barsine stood abruptly, her water glass forgotten. Thaddeus isn't a monster. No, he's worse. He's a man who believes the end justifies any means. Isolde's voice hardened. Think about it, Barsine. The Chen merger, why did he really want you on it? Your brilliant mind, or because you were someone he could manipulate, someone whose own drive for success would blind them to the truth? The room seemed to spin slightly. Barsine steadied herself against the back of her chair, her other hand protectively covering her stomach. Why are you showing me this? Because you're pregnant with his child. Isolde's words landed like physical blows. Because whatever game he's playing, whatever empire he's building, it can't be worth destroying more lives. She struggled to her feet. And because I'm dying, and I need to make this right. A knock at the door made them both freeze. Isolde's face went even paler. That's my brother, Perseus. He's been helping me investigate. She gathered the photos quickly. Take these copies, study them. But be careful. Thaddeus has eyes everywhere. The door opened to reveal a tall man with Isolde's colouring but harder features. He took in the scene with sharp eyes. Ms. Williams, he said, his tone neutral. I trust my sister has explained the situation. Some of it, Barsine replied carefully. There's more. Perseus moved to support his sister, who was clearly flagging. But not tonight. Isolde needs to rest, and you need time to process what you've learned. As if on cue, Barsine's phone buzzed. A text from Thaddeus. Can we talk? It's important. He'll want to tell you about my diagnosis, Isolde said, reading Barsine's expression. Go to him. Act normal, but remember what you've seen. The night air felt too thin as Barsine left the saint. Regis. Her mind raced with implications, possibilities, doubts. The envelope of photos seemed to burn in her briefcase. Their baby moved for the first time, a flutter so slight she might have imagined it. Thaddeus was waiting in his penthouse, the lights of Manhattan spread out behind him like a carpet of stars. He looked exhausted, his usual commanding presence dimmed by the weight of the day. Isolde has cancer, he said without preamble. Stage 4. The doctors say... He trailed off, running a hand through his hair. Barsine watched him, looking for signs of the man in those photos. Was this grief real? Or another performance in a long game she was only beginning to understand? I'm so sorry, she said, the words feeling hollow. I've asked her to move in with me, he continued. Just while she undergoes treatment. She'll need full-time care, and I owe her that much at least. The irony of his words, knowing what she now knew, made Barsine's chest tight. Of course, she managed. It's the right thing to do. He crossed to her then, taking her hands in his. This doesn't change anything between us, he said softly. What we have, it's real. Once Isolde is... He couldn't finish the sentence. Barsine looked up into those steel-grey eyes she had come to love. Were they the eyes of the man who had held her through Singapore's storms, or the eyes of someone who could orchestrate the destruction of companies and lives without remorse? I should go, she said, gently withdrawing her hands. It's been a long day. Barsine. His voice stopped her at the door. Whatever happens, know that I love you. She didn't turn around. Couldn't. The baby moved again, stronger this time, as if sensing her distress. Good night, Thaddeus. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. News of Isolde's illness spread through the firm like wildfire, drawing sympathy and support from even the most hardened corporate warriors. Thaddeus threw himself into arrangements, converting his penthouse's guest wing into a private medical suite, coordinating with specialists, managing the press. Barsine watched it all from a careful distance, her own secret becoming harder to hide. Her tailored suits grew looser, carefully draped to conceal her changing body. She threw herself into work, especially the Chen merger, looking for any sign that it might be part of whatever game Thaddeus was playing. Perseus appeared occasionally at the office, ostensibly to handle his sister's affairs. But Barsine noticed how he studied everything, how his questions about corporate matters seemed carefully targeted. The photos he and Isolde had shared revealed a pattern, but it felt incomplete, like pieces of a larger puzzle were still missing. One morning, about 3 weeks after the St. Regis meeting, Barsine arrived at her office to find a single rose on her desk. The card read simply, "I miss you, T." She stared at the flower, its deep red petals perfect and innocent. How many other women had received such tokens from him? How many other lives had he touched and potentially destroyed? The baby kicked, stronger now, a constant reminder of what was at stake. She had spent nights studying the evidence Isolde had provided, looking for holes, for explanations that would make sense of the man she loved and the monster those photos suggested. A soft knock at her door revealed Lisa Chen in New York for final merger negotiations. The young woman's face showed concern. "Are you all right? You look pale." "I'm fine," Barsine said automatically, then reconsidered. "Actually, no. I'm not fine at all." Lisa closed the door and sat down. "Is it about Mr. Riker's ex-wife? The whole legal community is talking about it?" "Among other things." Barsine touched her stomach absently, a gesture that didn't escape Lisa's notice. "Ah," the younger woman said softly. "That explains much." She leaned forward. "My grandfather always says that in business, as in life, truth comes in layers. You must peel them back carefully, or you risk destroying everything you're trying to understand. Your grandfather is a wise man." "Yes." Lisa stood, smoothing her skirt. "He also says that sometimes the most important truth is the one we're most afraid to face." She headed for the door, then paused. "Whatever you decide, Ms. Williams, remember that strength comes in many forms. Sometimes the strongest choice is to wait and watch." After she left, Barsine sat for a long time, staring at the rose on her desk. Outside her window, autumn was fading into winter, the last stubborn leaves clinging to their branches against the strengthening wind. She thought of Thaddeus, probably in his office right now, juggling corporate empire and personal tragedy with his usual precision. She thought of Isolde, fighting for life in a luxurious prison of medical equipment and bitter knowledge. She thought of the baby, growing stronger every day, unknowing heir to whatever truth finally emerged from this web of secrets and lies. The rose's perfume filled her office, sweet and somehow sad. Like everything in her life now, it carried double meanings, love and deception, beauty and thorns, truth and lies. She reached for her phone, then stopped. Lisa was right. Sometimes strength meant waiting, watching, understanding. She had fought too hard, come too far to let emotion cloud her judgment now. The baby kicked again, as if in agreement. Barsine placed both hands on her stomach, making a silent promise to the life within. Whatever the truth about Thaddeus turned out to be, whatever game was being played in the shadows of corporate power, she would protect their child, even if it meant protecting the baby from its own father. Outside her office, she could hear the normal sounds of corporate life continuing, phones ringing, keyboards clicking, deals being made and broken. But in here, in this moment of clarity, Barsine Williams began to formulate a plan. She would continue to play her role, the dedicated junior partner, the woman watching her lover support his dying ex-wife, the professional focused on the Chen merger. But beneath that facade, she would watch and learn. The truth would emerge, layer by layer, just as her pregnancy would become impossible to hide. The question was, which secret would be revealed first? And what would happen when all the shadows finally came to light? Chapter 6. Whispers in the Boardroom. Vice President Callista Blackwood stood at the window of her corner office, watching the first snow of winter dust Manhattan's skyline. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman of striking beauty and calculated perfection, every dark hair in place, her crimson lips curved in a smile that never quite reached her eyes. For 15 years, she had watched others climb the corporate ladder at Kingston and Associates while she remained just short of true power. First Thaddeus, with his mysterious rise from nothing to everything, then Isolde, whose marriage to him had seemed like a perfect merger of old money and new ambition. And now Barsine Williams, the foster care success story, who had somehow earned both partnership and Thaddeus's attention. But things were changing. Whispers had begun circulating through the firm's corridors, whispers that Callista had carefully cultivated. It had started with subtle observations about Barsine's looser clothing, her occasional morning absences, her declining of wine at corporate functions. The seeds of scandal were planted, and now they were beginning to sprout. "Ms. Blackwood," her assistant's voice came through the intercom. "The information you requested has arrived." Callista's smile deepened. "Send it in." The manila envelope on her desk contained what she'd been waiting for: medical records that should have been private, security footage that should have been deleted, hotel receipts that told an interesting story. Singapore had been just the beginning. The question was, how best to use this information? The sound of heels in the hallway made her look up. Through her open door, she saw Barsine walking past, one hand unconsciously resting on her stomach. The gesture confirmed what Callista already knew. Now, it was just a matter of timing. Her phone buzzed with a text from Perseus, Isolde's brother. Meeting confirmed. 30 minutes. The pieces were falling into place. While Thaddeus was distracted by his ex-wife's illness and his current lover's condition, Perseus was quietly accumulating shares in Kingston and Associates through various shell companies. A hostile takeover was brewing, and Callista had positioned herself to benefit regardless of the outcome. She gathered her materials and headed for the executive conference room. The room was empty when she arrived, exactly as planned. She needed a few minutes to prepare. From her briefcase, she withdrew several folders and arranged them precisely at each seat around the massive mahogany table. Each contained carefully selected information, different pieces of the puzzle she was constructing. By the time she finished, the afternoon sun had filled the room with long shadows that seemed to reach like fingers across the documents. Perseus arrived exactly on time, his tall frame filling the doorway. "Are we secure?" "The cameras are on a loop," Callista confirmed. "We have 20 minutes before the system resets." He took a seat, immediately opening the folder before him. His eyebrows rose as he read. "This is more than we expected. Your sister's medical records were surprisingly enlightening," Callista said, sitting across from him. "The timing of her original diagnosis, Thaddeus's subsequent actions, it all fits the pattern we've been tracking. And Williams? Definitely pregnant. About 4 months by my estimation. Singapore, obviously." Perseus leaned back, studying her. "Why are you really helping us, Callista? What's your stake in this?" She allowed herself a small, genuine smile. "Let's just say that 15 years is a long time to watch others play games with your future. When this is over, I want what I've earned: control of legal operations, a seat on the board, and a significant equity stake. And if we fail, we won't." She opened her own folder, revealing photographs of Thaddeus entering various buildings, meeting with people whose names never appeared in official records. "Because we have something they don't expect. Proof of everything." The door opened, making them both tense, but it was only Callista's assistant with coffee. Once they were alone again, Perseus pulled out his phone, showing her a series of messages. "The proxy votes are nearly secured. When we make our move, it will be swift. What about your sister?" Is she ready for this to become public? A shadow crossed Perseus's face. Isolde's condition is deteriorating faster than expected. She wants to see this through before... He didn't finish the sentence. And Barsine? She's a wild card in this. Which is why we need to act now, before she reveals her condition to Thaddeus. Once that happens, all our calculations change. Callista stood, moving to the window. Below, New York continued its eternal dance of commerce and ambition, unaware of the power plays happening in towers like this one. I've arranged for certain information about their relationship to reach the board members' wives. Social pressure can be a powerful tool. You really have thought of everything, haven't you? When you've waited as long as I have, you learn to be thorough. She turned back to him. There is one other thing. A contingency I've arranged in case things don't go as planned. She reached into her briefcase and withdrew a final folder, this one sealed. Inside is evidence of irregular trading patterns in Kingston and Associates stock, all traced back to Thaddeus's personal accounts. If it ever reaches the SEC. Perseus's eyes widened slightly. That would destroy him completely. Sometimes you have to be willing to burn it all down to rebuild something better. She checked her watch. The cameras will be back online in 2 minutes. We should go. As they gathered their materials, Perseus paused at the door. You're more dangerous than they know, aren't you? Callista's smile was razor sharp. That's what makes me valuable to you. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and phone calls, each one a careful move in the larger game she was playing. From her office, she watched Thaddeus leave early, probably to check on Isolde. Barsine worked late, as usual, the light in her office burning well past sunset. Around 8, Callista's phone buzzed with an email alert. The board secretary was scheduling an emergency meeting for the following week. Perfect timing. She began composing a series of emails, carefully worded hints and suggestions that would reach the right people at the right time. The scandal needed to build gradually, like a wave gathering force before it crashed onto the shore. A knock at her door revealed Johnson from IT, looking nervous. "I have what you asked for," he said, handing her a USB drive. "But if anyone finds out..." "Your bonus has already been arranged," she assured him. "No one will know." Once he left, she plugged the drive into her computer. Security footage from the Singapore trip filled her screen. Thaddeus and Barsine entering their suite, the storm raging outside. The timestamps told the story she needed to tell. Her phone buzzed again, a text from one of her sources in the Chen family's organization. Apparently questions were being raised about certain aspects of the merger. Seeds of doubt, carefully planted, were beginning to take root. Callista leaned back in her chair, satisfaction flowing through her veins like fine wine. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Soon, very soon, the carefully constructed world of Kingston and Associates would begin to crumble, and from its ashes she would finally claim what she deserved. As snow continued to fall outside her window, Callista Blackwood began to prepare for the next phase of her plan. The whispers in the boardroom were about to become shouts, and no one, not Thaddeus, not Barsine, not even Perseus, truly understood the storm that was about to break. The only question was, who would be left standing when it was over? In the gathering darkness, Callista smiled at her reflection in the window. After 15 years of watching and waiting, her time had finally come. And she intended to make the most of it, no matter who got hurt in the process. After all, in the world of corporate power, there was no room for sentiment, only winners and losers. And Callista Blackwood had no intention of losing ever again. Chapter 7. Hidden Alliances. The private wing of Thaddeus's penthouse had been transformed into something between a luxury spa and an intensive care unit. Medical equipment hummed quietly behind tasteful screens, while fresh flowers perfumed the air, masking the antiseptic undertones. Barsine stood in the doorway, watching Isolde adjust her silk robe as she settled into a plush armchair by the window. "You came," Isolde said, her voice weaker than their last meeting, but still carrying that cultured edge. "I wasn't sure you would. Your message said it was urgent." Barsine remained standing, one hand unconsciously resting on her now visible pregnancy. At 5 months, hiding her condition had become impossible. Though so far only Marcus and Lisa Chen seemed to have noticed, or at least they were the only ones who had shown genuine concern rather than strategic interest. "It is," Isolde gestured to a leather portfolio on the side table. "But first, how are you feeling? The second trimester can be challenging." The genuine warmth in her voice caught Barsine off guard. "I'm fine. The morning sickness has finally passed. Twins will do that to you, make everything more intense." At Barsine's startled look, Isolde smiled faintly. "I had my suspicions. The way you're carrying, the rapid changes. I was pregnant once, you know, early in our marriage." "I didn't know. Few do. I lost the baby at 4 months. It changed everything between Thaddeus and me." She shifted in her chair, suppressing a wince. "But that's not why I asked you here. Look in the portfolio." Barsine picked up the leather case, its weight substantial. Inside were documents, bank statements, transfer records, corporate filings. As she began to read, her legal training kicked in, recognizing patterns that made her blood run cold. "Perseus," she breathed. "My beloved brother," Isolde confirmed grimly. "The man who's been supposedly helping me investigate Thaddeus? He's been running his own game all along." The documents told a damning story. While Perseus had been feeding them information about Thaddeus's supposed corporate raiders, he had been orchestrating his own hostile takeover of Kingston and Associates. The evidence they'd seen of Thaddeus's wrongdoing had been skillfully manipulated. Real photos and documents taken out of context, woven together to create a false narrative. "The offshore accounts," Barsine said, her mind racing. "They're not Thaddeus's at all. They're Perseus's. He's been using my illness as cover, knowing Thaddeus would be distracted by caring for me." Isolde's hand trembled as she reached for a glass of water. "And he's not working alone. Callista Blackwood." The pieces were falling into place. "She's been watching me, gathering information about the pregnancy. Among other things." Isolde pulled another document from beside her chair. "This arrived this morning. They're planning to call an emergency board meeting next week, once they reveal my condition and your pregnancy, along with their manufactured evidence of Thaddeus's corruption. The board will demand his resignation." Barsine sat heavily in the chair opposite Isolde, "and Perseus will step in as a concerned brother-in-law, ready to save the firm, with Callista by his side as the new head of legal operations." Isolde's face showed a complexity of emotions: pain, anger, regret. "My own brother is using my death as a weapon." The babies kicked strongly, as if sensing their mother's distress. Barsine placed both hands on her stomach, trying to calm them. "Why are you showing me this? Why trust me?" "Because you're carrying Thaddeus's children. Because despite everything that's happened between us, I know he loves you in a way he never loved me." Isolde leaned forward, her eyes intense. "And because you're the only one who can stop them." "How?" "The evidence they've accumulated can be disproven, but only if we work together." Isolde struggled to her feet, moving to a desk in the corner. She returned with a USB drive. "I've been doing my own investigation. Everything's here. The real transactions, the manipulated photos, the connection between Perseus and Callista. But I'm too weak to do anything with it." Barsine took the drive, its weight negligible compared to the responsibility it represented. Why didn't you tell Thaddeus? Because he'd try to handle it himself, to protect everyone. Me, you, the company. He'd probably even try to protect Perseus for my sake. Isolde's smile was sad. My ex-husband's greatest strength is also his greatest weakness. He tries to carry every burden alone. A knock at the door made them both tense, but it was only the private nurse, coming to remind Isolde it was time for her medication. As the nurse prepared the injection, Isolde caught Barcine's hand. "We don't have much time," she whispered. "Perseus and Callista are moving faster than expected. They'll try to use your pregnancy against both you and Thaddeus, paint it as a scandal that undermines the firm's reputation." "Let them try." Barcine's voice was steel. "I didn't fight my way up from nothing to let corporate vultures destroy everything I've built. That's why I trust you." Isolde's grip tightened as the nurse administered the medication. "But be careful. They're watching everything, everyone. Trust no one except Lisa Chen. She's been helping me gather information through her family's connections." As if on cue, Barcine's phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. "Need to meet. Urgent news about the merger." "Go," Isolde said, her eyes already growing heavy from the medication. "But remember, we need proof that can't be disputed. Perseus is too smart to leave obvious trails." Barcine stood, tucking the USB drive into her purse. "I'll be careful. And Isolde, thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Isolde's voice was fading. "Just protect them, your babies, the firm, and yes, even Thaddeus. Sometimes the strongest women are the ones who choose to fight for others." The winter sunlight seemed harsh after the dim quiet of Isolde's room. Barcine made her way to the small cafe where Lisa was waiting, her mind already formulating strategies. The Chen merger had taught her how to think 10 moves ahead. Now she needed to apply those skills to a different kind of corporate warfare. Lisa was seated in a corner booth, her usual composed demeanor showing signs of strain. "They approached my grandfather," she said without preamble, "Perseus and Callista. They're trying to convince him that Thaddeus has been manipulating stock prices to artificially inflate the merger valuation." "Can they prove it?" "No, because it isn't true. But they've created a very convincing narrative." Lisa pulled out her tablet. "Look at these trading patterns. Someone's been deliberately creating fluctuations that mirror the ones they're accusing Thaddeus of orchestrating." Barcine studied the data, her years of corporate law experience letting her see the subtle manipulation. They're laying a foundation. Once they present their evidence about Thaddeus, these patterns will seem to confirm it. "Exactly. My grandfather is worried. He values honor above all else. If there's even a hint of impropriety, the merger could fall apart." Barcine felt a headache building behind her eyes. And without the Chen merger, Kingston and Associates would be vulnerable to Perseus's takeover attempt. "There's more." Lisa lowered her voice. "Callista has been meeting with our competitors, promising them preferential treatment once she takes control of legal operations. She's building alliances, preparing for the aftermath." The babies moved restlessly, picking up on their mother's tension. Barcine rubbed her stomach absently, her mind racing through possibilities. "We need to move first," she said finally, "before they can call that board meeting." "How?" "We don't have enough proof yet." "No, but we know where to look now." Barcine pulled out her phone, sending a carefully worded text to Marcus. Her assistant was loyal to a fault and had access to areas of the firm that even partners couldn't reach. "And we have something they don't expect." "What's that?" "They think they're facing a pregnant woman and a dying one, both too vulnerable to fight back. But they've forgotten something crucial." A small, fierce smile curved Barcine's lips. Sometimes the most dangerous opponents are the ones who have nothing left to lose. For the next week, Barsine orchestrated a subtle ballet of investigation and counter-moves. During the day, she maintained her usual routine, working on the Chen merger, attending meetings, pretending not to notice the whispers that followed her growing pregnancy. But at night, she and Lisa pored over documents, traced financial connections, and built their case. Isolde provided crucial insights from her sickbed, her sharp mind undiminished by her failing body. She remembered details about Perseus's past dealings, connections that seemed insignificant until viewed in the current context. The pieces began to come together like a complex legal brief. Marcus discovered irregularities in the firm's security logs, times when Callista had accessed servers she shouldn't have. Lisa's contacts in the Asian markets provided evidence of Perseus's attempts to manipulate stock prices. But it was Isolde who provided the final piece. "Check the trust fund," she whispered one evening, fighting through her medication haze. "The one our parents left. Perseus was always bitter that I received control of it. Look there." The trust fund records were a goldmine. They showed a pattern of embezzlement going back years, carefully hidden but unmistakable once you knew where to look. Perseus had been using his sister's money to fund his corporate raids, assuming her illness would prevent her from ever discovering the truth. As the day of the board meeting approached, Barsine felt the babies become more active, as if they too sensed the coming confrontation. She worked late into the night, checking and double-checking every detail. They would only get one chance at this. The night before the meeting, she received an unexpected visitor. Thaddeus stood in her office doorway, looking tired but determined. "You've been avoiding me," he said simply. "I've been busy. With the Chen merger, or with whatever you and Isolde are planning." Barsine's hand went protectively to her stomach. "You know. I know my ex-wife. And I know you." He stepped into the office, closing the door. "I also know about tomorrow's board meeting. Perseus thinks he's being subtle, but he's left traces. Then you know what they're planning. Not everything, but enough." He moved closer, his eyes dropping to her visible pregnancy. "Were you ever going to tell me?" "Yes," she whispered. "But then everything became so complicated." "Twins," he said softly. "Isolde told me. She's always been more observant than people give her credit for." He reached out, his hand hovering over her stomach but not quite touching. "May I?" Barsine nodded, unable to speak. His hand was warm through the silk of her blouse, and as if on cue, both babies kicked against his palm. The wonder in his eyes made her heart ache. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "know that this, you, our children, it's real. It's the most real thing in my life." "I know." She covered his hand with hers. "That's why we have to stop them, all of us, together." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Tell me everything." As the winter night deepened outside her office windows, Barsine finally shared the full story: Isolde's discovery, Perseus's betrayal, Callista's ambitions. With each revelation, she watched Thaddeus's expression move from shock to anger to determination. "Dawn's coming," he said finally, looking out at the lightening sky. "Are you ready?" Barsine thought of the evidence they'd gathered, of Isolde fighting through pain to help them, of Lisa risking her family's merger to support the truth. She thought of her babies, growing stronger every day, and the legacy she wanted to leave them. "Yes," she said firmly, "I'm ready." The sun rose over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. In a few hours, the board would convene, and everything would change. But as Barsine gathered her materials, she felt a strange calm settle over her. They had truth on their side. And sometimes, that was the most powerful weapon of all. Chapter 8. Crisis Point. The Kingston and Associates boardroom hummed with tension on that cold winter morning. Snow fell silently beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, creating an otherworldly atmosphere as board members took their seats. Barsine stood at the podium, preparing to present the final details of the Chen merger, acutely aware of every gaze fixed upon her growing pregnancy. Callista Blackwood sat near the head of the table, her crimson lips curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Perseus lounged beside her, projecting casual confidence. Neither of them knew what was coming. Thaddeus entered last, commanding attention without effort. His eyes met Barsine's briefly, a silent exchange of strength. They had agreed she would lead this presentation, knowing that what followed would change everything. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," Barsine began, her voice clear and strong, "before we discuss the Chen merger, there are some matters that require immediate attention." She felt it then, a wave of dizziness that made the room tilt slightly. The babies had been unusually active all morning, perhaps sensing her stress. She gripped the podium tighter, determined to continue. "As you know, the past few months have brought significant changes to Kingston and Associates. The pending merger with Chen Global Technologies represents not just a business opportunity, but a joining of legacies." Another wave of dizziness, stronger this time. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the room's careful climate control. From the corner of her eye, she saw Lisa Chen shift forward in her seat, concern evident on her face. "However," Barsine continued, forcing the words past increasingly dry lips, "there are those who would use this moment of transition for their own gain, who would manipulate truth and trust to—" The room spun violently. Barsine felt her knees buckle as darkness crept at the edges of her vision. The last thing she saw was Thaddeus rising from his chair, alarm replacing his usual composed expression. "Barsine!" She was dimly aware of strong arms catching her before she hit the floor, of voices raised in confusion and concern. Then everything went black. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beep of monitors and the soft whir of medical equipment. Barsine floated back to consciousness slowly, awareness returning in fragments. The first thing she registered was a warm hand holding hers. "Thaddeus?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm here." His face came into focus, worry etched in every line. "You've been unconscious for several hours. The doctors say it's severe preeclampsia." Memory rushed back, the boardroom, the presentation, their carefully laid plans now in disarray. "The babies are stable for now." A new voice joined them. Dr. Sarah Chen, Lisa's aunt and one of Singapore's top obstetricians, stepped into view. "But you're at serious risk. Your blood pressure is dangerously high and there are signs of organ stress." "How long?" "Until what?" Thaddeus asked, his grip on her hand tightening. "Until they need to be delivered," Barsine clarified, her mind already racing ahead to implications and contingencies. Dr. Chen's expression was grave. "Ideally, we'd want to wait at least another month. You're only at 24 weeks. But if your condition worsens, then deliver them." The words came out stronger than Barsine felt. "Do whatever you need to do to save them." "Barsine, no." Thaddeus's voice cracked with emotion. "We need to think about this carefully. The risks are mine to take." She met his gaze steadily. "They're our children, Thaddeus, our legacy. Whatever happens to me, they have to survive." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken feelings and fears. Then Thaddeus did something unprecedented. He broke down. Tears filled those steel-grey eyes as he pressed her hand to his lips. "I can't lose you," he whispered. "Any of you. I've already lost so much." "You haven't lost anything yet." Dr. Chen's practical tone cut through the emotion. "Ms. Williams is young and strong. With proper care and complete bed rest, we might be able to buy those crucial extra weeks." A knock at the door interrupted them. Lisa Chen entered, her usual composure shaken. "I'm sorry to intrude, but there's something you need to know. Perseus and Callista, they're making their move." Thaddeus straightened, the vulnerable man replaced by the CEO. "What are they doing?" "They've called an emergency session of the board for tomorrow morning. They're presenting their evidence about—" Lisa glanced at Barsine. "About everything." The monitors showed Barsine's heart rate increasing. Dr. Chen moved forward in alarm, but Barsine waved her off. "I need a moment with Thaddeus, please." Once they were alone, Barsine tried to sit up, but Thaddeus gently restrained her. "Don't. Whatever you're thinking, it can wait." "No, it can't." She fumbled for her phone on the bedside table. "The USB drive in my purse. Get it, now." He complied, worry creasing his brow. "What is it?" "Everything we need to stop them. Isolde helped me gather it all. The proof of Perseus's embezzlement, Callista's manipulation, everything." She showed him how to access the files. "But I can't be there tomorrow. You'll have to do this alone." "No." The word was firm. "I'm not leaving you." "You have to." Her hand went to her stomach, feeling the baby's move beneath her palm. "Our children deserve to be born into a legacy of truth, not lies. The board needs to know what really happened." "The board can wait. Your health is in the best possible hands." She managed a small smile. "Dr. Chen won't let anything happen to us. But the firm, our future, that's in your hands now." The weight of responsibility settled over him like a visible cloak. He studied the USB drive, then her face. "Tell me everything. Leave nothing out." For the next hour, Barsine detailed their investigation, how Isolde had discovered Perseus's betrayal, how they had traced the complex web of deceit, how each piece of evidence fit together to tell the true story. Thaddeus listened intently, asking occasional questions, his legal mind already forming strategies. As she finished, exhaustion began to overtake her. The monitors showed her blood pressure rising again. Thaddeus noticed and stood to call the nurse, but Barsine caught his hand. "Promise me," she whispered. "Promise you'll fight for all of us." He leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "I promise, but you have to promise something too." "What?" "Stay alive, stay strong, give our children the time they need to grow." His voice roughened with emotion. "I can fight any battle, face any enemy, but I can't do this without you." Before she could respond, Dr. Chen returned with a team of nurses. "Her pressure's spiking again. We need to start magnesium sulfate immediately." As medical personnel swarmed around her, Barsine kept her eyes locked with Thaddeus's. In that gaze was everything they couldn't say. Love, fear, determination, hope. Then darkness began creeping in again, and she felt herself slipping away. "Thaddeus." Her voice was fading. "I'm here." His hand squeezed hers. "I'm right here. Tell Isolde. Thank her." The words were becoming harder to form. "And remember, sometimes the greatest victories come from the hardest battles." Then unconsciousness claimed her again, but not before she heard his response, a fierce whisper that followed her into the darkness. "I'll win this battle for all of us. I promise." Hours passed in a haze of medical interventions and monitoring. Barsine drifted in and out of consciousness, aware sometimes of voices discussing her condition, other times of warm hands holding hers. Thaddeus, Lisa, even Isolde, who had insisted on being brought to the hospital despite her own weakness. Through it all, the babies continued to move, their presence a constant reminder of what was at stake. Each kick, each flutter, was a message of life and persistence, a reminder that some things were worth any sacrifice. In her more lucid moments, Barsine thought about the path that had brought her here, From foster care to Harvard Law, from junior associate to partner, from professional admiration to profound love. Every step had been a fight, every achievement earned through determination and grit. This was just another battle, perhaps the most important one of her life, and like every other battle, she would face it with everything she had. As snow continued to fall outside her hospital window, Barsine Williams made a silent promise to her unborn children. Whatever happened tomorrow in that boardroom, whatever challenges lay ahead, she would give them the time they needed. She would stay strong, stay alive, stay fighting. Because sometimes the greatest act of love is simply holding on, one breath at a time, until dawn breaks and brings with it the promise of a new day. The monitors beeped steadily, marking each precious moment. In the quiet of the hospital night, as Thaddeus prepared for tomorrow's confrontation and their babies continued their determined growth, Barsine finally allowed herself to rest. Tomorrow would bring its own battles. But for now, in this moment of crisis, she had done everything she could. The rest was in Thaddeus's hands. Chapter 9. Redemption's Price. The morning sun cast long shadows across Isolde's hospital room as she struggled to sit up in bed. Her body was failing, but her mind remained sharp, focused on the battle being waged in the Kingston and Associates boardroom at this very moment. Beside her, a nurse adjusted her IV, concerned by the determination in her patient's eyes. "Mrs. Riker, you need to rest," the nurse advised gently. "What I need," Isolde replied with unexpected strength, "is my laptop and phone, now." Down the hall, in the high-risk maternity ward, Barsine lay surrounded by monitors, each one tracking a different aspect of her precarious condition. The twins were stable, but her blood pressure remained dangerously high. Dr. Chen had ordered complete isolation, no visitors, no stress, no connection to the outside world. But Isolde knew better than anyone that some battles couldn't wait for better timing. With trembling fingers, she dialed a number she hadn't used in years. "James? It's Isolde Riker. I need that favor you've owed me since Geneva." Within an hour, her hospital room had been transformed into a command center. Multiple tablets displayed live feeds from various sources, while her laptop showed a secure connection to the firm's servers. James, her old friend from her intelligence agency days, had come through one last time. "Perseus is about to make his move," he reported, watching the security feeds. "Callista's with him. They're heading into the boardroom now." Isolde nodded, saving her strength for what needed to be done. On one screen, she could see Thaddeus standing at the window, studying the USB drive Barsine had given him. He looked older somehow, worn by worry for both the woman he loved and the children she carried. "It's time," Isolde whispered, more to herself than to James. She began typing, her fingers finding strength in purpose. The message she composed was brief but devastating, a full confession of her brother's crimes, backed by irrefutable evidence from her own investigation. But more than that, it was a story of betrayal and redemption, of a dying woman's last effort to right the wrongs that had been done in her name. As Perseus began his presentation to the board, painting a picture of corporate corruption and scandal, Isolde pressed send. The message went not only to every board member, but to key financial journalists and regulatory authorities. "Your brother won't survive this," James warned softly. "He stopped being my brother the moment he decided to use my death as a weapon," Isolde replied, her voice steady despite the pain racking her body. "Some sins can't be forgiven." The boardroom erupted into chaos as phones began buzzing with notifications. Perseus faltered mid-sentence as he saw his sister's name appear on screen after screen. Callista's composed mask cracked as she realized their carefully constructed plans were crumbling. But Isolde wasn't finished. She had one more card to play. "James, the video conference link?" He nodded, setting up the connection. Moments later, Isolde's face appeared on the boardroom's main screen, her illness evident but her eyes blazing with purpose. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," she began, her cultured voice carrying despite its weakness, "I believe there are some things you need to know about my brother's true intentions." For the next 20 minutes, she laid bare the entire conspiracy, the embezzled trust fund, the manipulated evidence against Thaddeus, the planned hostile takeover. With each revelation, she provided proof that couldn't be disputed or explained away. "My time is short," she concluded, looking directly at Perseus, "but I will not let my last act be one of silent complicity. The truth must be told, no matter the cost." As security arrived to escort Perseus and Callista from the boardroom, Isolde felt the last of her strength ebbing away, but there was one more thing she needed to do. "Thaddeus," she said softly, once the others had left. "Go to her. Now." He understood immediately. "Isolde, no time for that. Your children need their father, and Barcine needs you more than ever. This was my gift to all of you, a chance at the future you deserve." Tears filled his eyes, the first she'd seen since their wedding day. "Thank you," he whispered. "Just promise me one thing," she managed, fighting to stay conscious. "Name one of them after my grandmother Rose. She was the strongest woman I ever knew." "I promise." The connection went dark as Isolde finally allowed herself to rest. James moved quickly to catch her as she slumped in her chair, immediately calling for medical assistance. "Was it worth it?" he asked as doctors rushed in. A small smile curved her lips. "More than you know." Hours later, as the winter sun began to set, Isolde Riker closed her eyes for the last time. But she went peacefully, knowing she had finally done something truly worthy of remembrance. She had given her ex-husband and the woman who would raise his children the gift of truth, and with it the chance for a love unencumbered by lies. In the maternity ward, Barcine's condition began to stabilize as the stress of secrets and suspicion lifted. The twins grew stronger with each passing day, as if they too understood that their future had been secured by a woman who had chosen redemption over resentment. And in the end, that was Isolde's true legacy. Not the society marriages or charity galas, or even the corporate power plays, but the simple, profound act of choosing love over bitterness, truth over vengeance, hope over fear. As news of her passing spread through the firm, even those who had never truly known her felt the weight of her final gift. She had sacrificed everything, used her last breath to ensure that justice would prevail and love would triumph. But Callista Blackwood, watching from the shadows, was not finished yet. As she gathered the fragments of her shattered plans, a new strategy began to form. Isolde's redemption had come at a price, but the final cost had yet to be paid. Chapter 10. Labor of Love. 3 days after Isolde's passing, Manhattan was gripped by the worst winter storm in decades. Snow whirled past the hospital windows as Barcine shifted uncomfortably in her bed, trying to find a position that would ease the increasing pressure in her lower back. At 25 weeks pregnant, every day the twins stayed inside was crucial, but something felt different this morning. Dr. Chen studied the monitors with growing concern. "Your blood pressure is rising again," she said, making notes in the chart, "and there are some irregularities in the contraction patterns." "It's too early," Barcine whispered, her hand protective over her swollen belly. "They need more time." Before the doctor could respond, Lisa Chen burst into the room, her usually composed demeanor shattered. "Turn on the TV," she said breathlessly. "Now!" The wall-mounted screen flickered to life, showing a news anchor with a serious expression. Below him, the ticker read, "Breaking news, corporate scandal rocks, Kingston and Associates." "Sources close to the firm have revealed a pattern of inappropriate relationships and potential securities fraud," the anchor was saying. Documents obtained exclusively by this network suggest that CEO Thaddeus Riker's relationship with junior partner Barsine Williams may have compromised several major deals, including the pending Chen merger. Barsine felt a sharp contraction grip her body as images flashed across the screen, security footage from Singapore, financial documents, even medical records showing her pregnancy. Someone had orchestrated a massive information leak, timed perfectly to maximize damage. "Callista!" she breathed through the pain. "This is her revenge." Dr. Chen moved quickly to check the monitors. "Your contractions are getting stronger. We need to focus on keeping you calm." But calm was impossible as the story continued to unfold. The news channel showed photographs of Thaddeus entering her apartment building late at night, emails discussing the Chen merger taken out of context, and most damaging of all, speculation about whether their relationship had begun before Isolde's illness. "This is a coordinated attack," Lisa said, already on her phone. "It's hitting all major networks simultaneously. Social media is exploding." Another contraction seized Barsine, stronger than before. The monitors began beeping urgently as her blood pressure spiked. Dr. Chen called for additional medical staff, her voice sharp with concern. "Where's Thaddeus?" Barsine managed between breaths. "In emergency meetings with the board," Lisa replied. "The Chen family is demanding answers, threatening to pull out of the merger. He's trying to hold everything together." The irony wasn't lost on Barsine. Once again, Thaddeus had to choose between his professional obligations and his personal life. But this time, the stakes were literally life and death. "Get him," Dr. Chen ordered Lisa. "These babies might be coming today, whether we're ready or not." As if in response to their mother's distress, both twins began moving vigorously. The monitors showed their heart rates increasing, adding to the cacophony of medical alerts. Outside the hospital, reporters had already begun gathering, alerted by the breaking story. Security had to be increased around the maternity ward as photographers tried to get shots through the windows. In the midst of this chaos, Barsine's phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "Enjoying the spotlight? This is just the beginning." See. Another contraction ripped through her body, this one accompanied by a frightening sensation of pressure. Dr. Chen quickly examined her, then began barking orders to the medical team. "She's dilating. We need to move her to delivery now." "No," Barsine protested weakly. "It's too soon. They're not ready." "They're coming whether they're ready or not," Dr. Chen replied grimly. "The stress has triggered active labor. We can try to delay it with medications, but—" She was interrupted by Marcus bursting into the room, looking frantic. "Ms. Williams, you need to see this. Callista's called a press conference at the firm." On the TV, the scene shifted to Kingston and Associates' lobby. Callista Blackwood stood at a podium, the picture of professional concern in a perfectly tailored suit. "As acting head of legal operations," she was saying, "I feel compelled to address these serious allegations. While the relationship between Mr. Riker and Ms. Williams is a personal matter, its impact on our firm's integrity cannot be ignored." The rest of her words were lost as another contraction seized Barsine, this one strong enough to make her cry out. The medical team began preparing for emergency transport to the delivery suite. "Someone needs to tell Thaddeus," she gasped between contractions. "He has to know." Lisa was already dialing, but the call went straight to voicemail. The board meeting was still in progress, with the firm's future hanging in the balance. As they wheeled her toward delivery, Barsine caught glimpses of the continuing news coverage. Callista was masterfully playing to the cameras, expressing deep concern about the potential impact on client confidence while carefully avoiding direct accusations. "She planned this," Barsine told Lisa as they waited for an elevator. "She knew the stress would affect the pregnancy. She's trying to force a crisis on all fronts at once." Another contraction hit before Lisa could respond. Dr. Chen checked the monitors again, her expression growing more worried. Baby A's heart rate is dropping. We need to move now. The delivery suite was a flurry of activity as medical staff prepared for an extremely premature birth. Basine could hear Dr. Chen discussing options with other specialists: C-section versus natural delivery, steroid shots for the baby's lungs, survival statistics at 25 weeks. Through it all, the TV in the corner continued broadcasting the unfolding scandal. Callista had been joined by concerned board members who questioned whether the firm could survive this crisis of confidence. The contractions were coming faster now, each one more intense than the last. Basine fought to stay focused, to keep breathing, to give her babies every possible chance. But the combination of physical pain and emotional distress was overwhelming. "Please," she whispered, though she wasn't sure who she was talking to, God, the babies, or Thaddeus. "Please hold on." Suddenly, Marcus appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Riker's on his way," he announced breathlessly. "He left the board meeting as soon as he heard." Relief flooded through Basine, only to be replaced by another crushing contraction. Dr. Chen's examination showed she was now fully dilated. There would be no stopping this labor. "The babies are coming now," the doctor announced. "We can't wait any longer." The next few minutes were a blur of activity as the medical team prepared for delivery. Specialists from the NICU stood ready with incubators and equipment. The monitors beeped steadily, tracking 3 precious heartbeats. Through the window, camera flashes could be seen as photographers tried to capture any glimpse of the unfolding drama. The media circus outside contrasted sharply with the focused intensity in the delivery room. Then, just as Dr. Chen was about to begin, Thaddeus burst through the door. He looked disheveled, his tie loose and his hair messed from running, but his eyes were clear and determined as he took his place beside Basine. "I'm here," he said, taking her hand. "I'm not leaving again." "The firm," she managed between breaths, "can wait. This is where I need to be." Another contraction peaked, and Dr. Chen called for Basine to push. The next few minutes were a testament to human determination as she fought to bring their children into the world safely. Baby A arrived first, a tiny, perfect girl weighing just over a pound. The NICU team moved with practiced efficiency, whisking her to an incubator as her first cry pierced the air. "She's breathing on her own," someone announced. "Good signs." But there was no time to celebrate as contractions resumed for baby B. This delivery was more complicated, the baby in a breech position. Dr. Chen's face showed intense concentration as she worked to guide the infant safely out. Finally, a second cry joined the first. Another girl, slightly smaller than her sister but fighting just as hard to survive. As the babies were stabilized and moved to the NICU, Basine caught glimpses of their tiny forms. They were impossibly small, but their cries were strong, fighters like their mother. Thaddeus stood watching his daughters, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. In this moment, corporate scandals and media circus seemed very far away. But reality intruded as Lisa appeared with urgent news. Callista's press conference is still going. She's calling for Thaddeus's resignation and a full SEC investigation. "Let her," Thaddeus said, not taking his eyes off the incubators. "Some things are more important. The Chen merger will survive or it won't." He turned to face her. "Right now, my family needs me." As if to emphasize his point, one of the babies set off a monitor alarm. The medical team rushed to adjust equipment, every second critical in these early hours. Basine watched it all through a haze of exhaustion and medication. She had done what seemed impossible, brought 2 lives into the world far too early, yet giving them a fighting chance. Now they had to face what came next. The TV still played silently in the corner, showing Callista's triumphant face as she continued her character assassination. But in the NICU, Surrounded by beeping monitors and the quiet efficiency of medical staff, none of that seemed to matter. These tiny lives, barely begun but already fighting so hard, were all that was important. Whatever Callista threw at them, whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As snow continued to fall outside, blanketing the city in white, Barcine finally allowed herself to rest. Thaddeus kept vigil between her room and the NICU, his presence a constant reminder that some choices, once made, defined a life forever. He had chosen love over power, family over empire. And in doing so, he had proven himself worthy of the legacy these tiny fighters would one day inherit. The battle wasn't over. Callista's revenge was still unfolding, the firm's future still uncertain. But for now, in this quiet space between crisis and resolution, there was only love, hope, and the steady beeping of monitors keeping time with 4 precious heartbeats. Chapter 11. Twin Miracles. The neonatal intensive care unit existed in a world of its own, where time was measured in heartbeats and breaths rather than minutes and hours. Thaddeus stood between 2 incubators, his normally commanding presence softened by wonder as he watched his daughters fight for life. Aurora, the firstborn, had her mother's determination written in every tiny movement. Phoenix, smaller but equally fierce, had already pulled out her breathing tube twice. "They're fighters," Dr. Chen said softly, checking the monitors, "just like their mother." Through the NICU window, he could see Barcine being wheeled back to her room after another round of tests. The emergency delivery had taken its toll, but she refused to rest as long as their daughters needed her. The same determination that had made her a brilliant lawyer now focused entirely on willing their premature twins to survive. His phone buzzed, another message from the board. Callista's media assault had thrown the firm into chaos. The Chen merger hung by a thread. Clients were calling with concerns, and the stock price was dropping. But for the first time in his life, Thaddeus Riker had found something more important than corporate empire. "Mr. Riker?" One of the NICU nurses approached. Aurora showing signs of wanting to breathe on her own. He moved to the first incubator, placing his hand against the clear plastic. Aurora, all 23 ounces of her, squirmed beneath the maze of tubes and wires. Her tiny fists clenched as if ready to fight the world itself. "That's it, little one," he whispered. "Show them what Rikers are made of." A commotion in the hallway drew his attention. Through the NICU windows, he could see Lisa Chen arguing with hospital security. Her presence meant either very good news or very bad. There was no middle ground left in their world. He found her in the waiting area, tablet in hand and fire in her eyes. "You need to see this," she said without preamble. "Callista's gone too far." The tablet showed multiple news feeds, all carrying the same story. Somehow, Callista had obtained Barcine's personal medical records, including details about her time in foster care. The implications being spun were ugly, suggestions that she had targeted Thaddeus for his money and position, that the pregnancy was planned manipulation. "She's trying to destroy everything," Lisa said, her voice tight with anger. "Not just the firm, but Barcine's reputation, your family's future." Thaddeus felt something shift inside him, a cold clarity replacing the warm fog of new fatherhood. "Where's Marcus?" "Already on his way with what you'll need." Marcus appeared minutes later, carrying a briefcase Thaddeus hadn't opened since his early days as a corporate raider. Inside was everything they had gathered on Callista, everything Isolde had discovered before her death, a nuclear option they had hoped not to use. "Sir," Marcus hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Once this goes public." "She crossed a line," Thaddeus replied, his voice carrying an edge that had made corporate giants tremble. "She didn't just come after me or the firm, she came after my children's mother." The next hour was a blur of activity. Lisa coordinated with her family's contacts in Asian markets, where tomorrow had already begun. Marcus worked his network of media connections, preparing for synchronized releases across multiple platforms. And Thaddeus did what he did best, orchestrated a takeover. But first, he had a promise to keep. He found Barsine awake in her room, watching the twins on the NICU camera feed installed by her bed. Despite her exhaustion, her mind was still sharp as ever. "Aurora's trying to breathe on her own," she said without looking away from the screen. "Phoenix's heart rate has stabilized. They're perfect." He sat beside her, taking her hand. "But we need to talk about what's coming." She finally turned to face him. "Callista? She released your medical records, tried to paint you as a gold digger." His grip on her hand tightened. "I'm going to end this, but it won't be pretty. The fallout will be worth it." Her voice carried absolute conviction. "Our daughters deserve to grow up without this shadow over them." He studied her face, pale but determined, beautiful in her fierce maternal protection. "I love you," he said simply. "I should have said it months ago, should have shouted it from the rooftops instead of trying to be discreet." "Then say it now." Her eyes challenged him, not just to me, to everyone. Understanding dawned. "You want me to go public? I want you to show our daughters what it means to fight for what matters." She squeezed his hand. "Callista thinks she can destroy us with secrets and lies. So let's strip her of her weapons. No more shadows, no more scandal, just truth." The plan came together with military precision. While Callista was holding another press conference, smugly certain of her victory, Thaddeus made his move. It started with a simple tweet from his rarely used personal account. "Time for truth. Press conference in 30 minutes. Kingston and Associates lobby." The media descended like wolves, expecting more scandal. Instead, they found Thaddeus standing at the podium, holding his newborn daughter's first photos. Behind him, screens showed live feeds from the NICU, where Aurora and Phoenix continued their brave fight for life. "My name is Thaddeus Riker," he began, his voice carrying the authority that had made him legendary in corporate law. "And it's time to tell you about love." For the next 20 minutes, he laid out everything: his relationship with Barsine, their connection in Singapore, the joy of impending fatherhood. But he also revealed Callista's machinations, backed by irrefutable evidence, trading records showing her manipulation of stock prices, email trails proving her collaboration with Perseus, and most damaging, recordings of her plotting to stress Barsine into premature labor. "She didn't just attack a corporation," Thaddeus concluded, his voice thick with controlled rage. "She deliberately endangered the lives of 2 innocent children. My daughters, born 3 months early because of her actions, are fighting for their lives right now." The room erupted with questions, but Thaddeus held up his hand. "There's more. Ms. Blackwood's attempts to destroy this firm go beyond personal vendetta. For the past 5 years, she has been systematically undermining our client relationships, selling confidential information to competitors." On the screens behind him, documents began to appear, proof of Callista's long game of corporate espionage. The evidence was devastating, gathered through Isolde's final investigation and supplemented by Lisa Chen's family connections. In her office, watching the broadcast, Callista reached for her phone to begin damage control. But it was already too late. FBI agents were entering the building, armed with warrants based on the evidence Thaddeus had quietly provided days earlier. Back in the NICU, Barsine watched it all unfold on her tablet, her free hand resting on Phoenix's incubator. The tiny baby had just reached out and grabbed her mother's finger through the access port, the first real contact they'd shared. "Your daddy's quite something," she whispered to her daughters, "and he's doing this all for you." Aurora chose that moment to take her first unassisted breath, setting off monitors that brought nurses running. But these weren't crisis alarms. They were triumph alerts. Both twins were growing stronger by the hour, defying medical expectations just as their parents were defying corporate warfare. The press conference reached its climax as Thaddeus revealed his masterstroke. In light of recent events, I'm announcing a restructuring of Kingston and Associates. Effective immediately, I'm promoting Barsine Williams to full partner and co-CEO. Once she recovers from giving birth to our miraculous daughters, we will lead this firm together, as equals in every way. The announcement sent shockwaves through the corporate world. Co-CEO arrangements were rare enough, but this was unprecedented. A complete rejection of the old boys club mentality that had dominated corporate law for generations. But Thaddeus wasn't finished. And to ensure there are no further questions about our commitment, he continued, pulling something from his pocket, I have one more announcement. He held up a diamond ring that caught the light like captured stars. Barsine Williams, if you're watching, and I know you are, will you marry me? Not for appearance's sake, not for corporate stability, but because I love you and our daughters more than anything in this world. In the NICU, Barsine's tears fell freely as both babies seemed to wiggle in response to their father's voice coming through the tablet. The nurses were openly crying, and even Dr. Chen was suspiciously misty-eyed. Yes, Barsine whispered, then realizing he couldn't hear her, typed it into her phone and sent it to Lisa, who immediately handed it to Thaddeus. His smile lit up every screen carrying the press conference. She said yes, he announced, prompting applause from the gathered media. Even hardened reporters found themselves caught up in the moment. As if celebrating their parents' engagement, both twins chose that moment to show remarkable improvement. Aurora continued breathing on her own for over an hour, while Phoenix's vital signs strengthened to near-normal levels. They know, Dr. Chen said softly, checking their charts. Somehow they know they're part of something special. The day that had begun with Callista's attempted destruction ended in multiple triumphs. She was led out of the building in handcuffs, her carefully constructed schemes lying in ruins. The Chen family, impressed by Thaddeus's honest handling of the crisis, not only reaffirmed their commitment to the merger, but increased their investment. But the real victory was happening in the NICU, where two tiny fighters continued to prove that love was stronger than hate, truth more powerful than lies, and family worth any sacrifice. Thaddeus returned to the hospital still wearing his press conference suit, the diamond ring now safely in his pocket, waiting for the proper moment. He found Barsine dozing in a rocking chair between the incubators, one hand reaching into each through the access ports, maintaining constant contact with their daughters. "Welcome back, hero," she murmured without opening her eyes. He knelt beside her chair, finally allowing himself to feel the emotional weight of the day. "I meant every word," he said softly, "about you, about us, about our future." "I know." She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. "So did I." Aurora chose that moment to grasp her father's finger through the incubator port, while Phoenix maintained her hold on her mother's. Connected as a family, they shared a moment of perfect peace in the midst of their ongoing storm. Outside, reporters still crowded the hospital entrance, photographers angled for shots through windows, and the corporate world buzzed with the day's unprecedented events. But in the NICU, wrapped in the quiet beeping of monitors and the soft whoosh of tiny breaths, none of that mattered. They had fought their battles, personal, professional, medical, and emerged stronger. Their daughters were living proof that miracles could happen, that love could triumph, that sometimes the biggest victories came in the smallest packages. Thaddeus finally pulled out the ring, sliding it onto Barsine's finger through the incubator port so their daughters could be part of the moment. It fit perfectly, catching the light like promises made real. "To new beginnings," he whispered. "To family," Barsine replied. And in their incubators, Aurora and Phoenix continued to grow stronger, already showing the determination that would make them true heirs to their parents' legacy of love, courage, and unwavering hope. Chapter 12. Hearts and Power. Snow fell softly outside the hospital windows, each flake a tiny miracle dancing in the winter light. Inside the NICU, another kind of miracle was unfolding. Aurora and Phoenix, now 6 weeks old, had defied every medical expectation. Their incubators still hummed with life-supporting technology, but the twins grew stronger each day, their fighting spirit a testament to the power of love and determination. Barsine stood at the window, watching her daughters sleep. Her hospital gown had been replaced by a carefully tailored maternity suit. Today was her first day back at Kingston and Associates, her first board meeting as co-CEO. The world beyond these peaceful NICU walls was waiting, and Callista had played her final card. "They're ready for transport," Dr. Chen announced, entering with her final charts. "All vitals are stable. They can make the trip to the boardroom." It had been Thaddeus's idea, bringing the twins to witness this moment, not just as a statement, but as a reminder of what really mattered. The carefully controlled NICU environment could be temporarily recreated in the conference room adjacent to the boardroom, allowing the babies to be close while remaining perfectly safe. As the medical team prepared for the careful movement of the incubators, Barsine's phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "Callista's evidence has been distributed to all board members. She's calling for an immediate vote of no confidence." The evidence, years of supposed corporate indiscretions by Thaddeus, carefully documented and presented with devastating precision. It was Callista's revenge from prison, her final attempt to destroy the man who had ended her career. But she had made one crucial mistake. The boardroom was packed when Barsine arrived. Board members sat grim-faced, copies of Callista's documents before them. In the corner, a news crew had been allowed in, Callista's doing, ensuring maximum public exposure for what she planned to be Thaddeus's downfall. Through the glass wall, Barsine could see the twins in their temporary medical setup, attended by Dr. Chen and her team. Their presence gave her strength as she took her place at the head of the table, Thaddeus's chair conspicuously empty beside her. "Before we begin," she said, her voice carrying the authority of both new mother and seasoned lawyer, "I believe Ms. Blackwood has something she'd like to present." The screen at the end of the room flickered to life, showing Callista in her prison conference room. Despite her orange jumpsuit, she managed to project an air of corporate polish. "Distinguished members of the board," Callista began, "what I'm about to show you will change everything you thought you knew about Thaddeus Riker." The evidence was damning. Photos, documents, testimonies, each piece carefully crafted to show a pattern of corruption and manipulation stretching back years. The board members' expressions grew darker with each revelation. When Callista finished, silence fell over the room. All eyes turned to Barsine, waiting for her defense of the man who was both her co-CEO and future husband. Instead of speaking, she smiled. "Marcus," she said softly, "would you please escort our final guest in?" The doors opened and Thaddeus entered, but he wasn't alone. With him came Isolde's most trusted friend, James, now revealed as a senior FBI agent, and in his hands was a USB drive that made Callista's face go pale, even through the video feed. "Ms. Blackwood," James said formally, "thank you for finally giving us everything we needed." The next 30 minutes systematically destroyed Callista's carefully constructed plan. Every piece of evidence she had presented was revealed to be based on documents she had illegally accessed. Documents that had been quietly watermarked over the past 5 years, creating a trail of corporate espionage that would add decades to her sentence. "You see," Barsine explained to the stunned board, "Isolde suspected someone was accessing classified files years ago. She and Thaddeus set up an elaborate trap. a false trail of corruption that only someone with illegal access would find. Every document Ms. Blackwood just presented is proof of her own crimes, not Thaddeus's. Callista's face contorted with rage. You knew? All this time. We knew someone was stealing information, Thaddeus replied, taking his seat beside Barsine. Isolde helped us set the trap, her final gift to the firm and to us. Through the glass wall, Aurora chose that moment to wave her tiny fist, setting off a ripple of soft laughter in the boardroom. Even the news crew couldn't maintain their professional detachment at the sight. So, Barsine continued, now we have a choice to make. The future of Kingston and Associates hangs not on manufactured scandals or corporate intrigue, but on a simple question. What kind of firm do we want to be? She stood, moving to the glass wall that separated them from the twins. My daughters were born into this firm's darkest hour. They fought for life, while others fought for power. They taught me, taught all of us, what really matters. Thaddeus joined her, his hand finding hers. The old way of doing business dies today, he announced. We're building something new, something based on integrity, innovation, and the understanding that true power comes not from control, but from collaboration. One by one, the board members stood. The vote wasn't just about confirming their leadership. It was about choosing a new direction, a new legacy. It was unanimous. As camera flashes captured the historic moment, Phoenix woke up and caught her father's eye through the glass. Her tiny smile, her first, lit up the room brighter than any photographer's flash. For you, Thaddeus whispered to his daughters. Everything for you. 3 months later, on a spring morning filled with cherry blossoms and promise, Aurora and Phoenix finally came home. The penthouse had been transformed into a wonderland of soft colors and gentle light. In the nursery, photographs told their extraordinary story. 2 tiny fighters who had inspired a revolution in corporate culture. 2 parents who had risked everything for love. Barsine stood in the doorway, watching Thaddeus rock Aurora while Phoenix slept peacefully in her crib. He looked up, his smile no longer the careful half-grin of a CEO, but the full, joyful expression of a man who had found his true purpose. The Chen merger finalized today, he said softly. Matthew insisted on adding a clause naming the twins as future board members. Planning ahead? Building a legacy. He placed Aurora next to her sister, both of them perfect in their matching rose-colored onesies. The right kind of legacy. Barsine touched the engagement ring on her finger, remembering everything that had brought them to this moment. Isolde would be proud, she said, of all of it. She knew. Thaddeus wrapped his arms around her. She knew love was stronger than ambition, truth more powerful than schemes. She gave us the chance to prove it. Outside, Manhattan glittered in the spring sunshine, its towers reaching toward the sky like dreams made real. But the true miracle was here, in this quiet room where 2 tiny girls slept peacefully, unaware that their very existence had changed the face of corporate America. Ready for tomorrow? Thaddeus asked. Their wedding was just days away, a celebration of love, family, and new beginnings. Ready for everything, Barsine replied, leaning into his embrace, as long as we're together. Aurora and Phoenix stirred in their sleep, reaching for each other just as they had in their incubators. Their tiny hands clasped, a gesture of unconscious solidarity that brought tears to their parents' eyes. In that moment, watching their daughters sleep in the gentle spring light, Barsine and Thaddeus understood that true power had nothing to do with boardrooms or corporate empires. It lived in the quiet spaces between heartbeats, in the strength of promises kept, in the miracle of love that could transform not just 2 lives, but an entire world. Their story had begun in a storm-swept hotel room in Singapore, fueled by ambition and attraction. It had weathered corporate intrigue, medical crises, and personal betrayals. But it ended here, in a sunlit nursery in Manhattan, with two tiny miracles and the simple, profound truth that love, real, fierce, unshakable love, was the greatest power of all. And in their sleep, Aurora and Phoenix smiled, as if knowing they were home, safe in the legacy of love their parents had built, one heartbeat at a time.